Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and it is as follows. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that the Palestinians will submit a request later this month for the UN Security Council to recognize a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, while asking for the UN Security Council to set a timeline for an Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 borders. Abbas said that if the Palestinians can get 9 of the UN Security Council members of the 15 to approve the Palestinian request, that they will ask the entire UN Security Council to vote upon the proposal for Palestinian statehood. Wasil Youssef, a senior Palestinian official, said that the Palestinians will do so because the United States is pushing to resume bilateral negotiations between the Palestinians and Israel, even while it is clear that these talks have failed throughout the last few years. In a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in the United States, Chief Palestinian Negotiator Saeb Erekat pleaded for the United States to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN Security Council. He said, "Urgent steps from the international community to protect the two-state solution is needed. Therefore, we urge the U.S. administration to support Palestinian proposal at the UN Security Council in order to establish the borders of a Palestinian state." In response, U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry reiterated to Palestinian Chief Negotiator Saeb Erekat that the United States was opposed to unilateral steps by either the Palestinians or Israel that would attempt to prejudge the outcome of final status negotiations between the two sides. "Nothing has yet been formally presented at the United Nations," Psaki said, "so this is a preliminary discussion. And obviously, having a back and forth and hearing from them is part of the reason why we invited the Palestinians to come to the United States to discuss the matter." Urging the UN Security Council to call for an end to Israeli occupation contradicts the Palestinian stated goal of a two-state solution and having their own state, which is a goal that the United States supports. However, Israel cabinet members are warning that U.S. President Barack Obama threatened Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the United States may choose to not oppose future hostile UN Security Council resolutions against Israel unless Israel bows to American policy demands. Quoting Israel ministerial level sources, diplomatic correspondent Ariel Kahana said that Netanyahu told his colleagues in recent days that his office's understanding of the issue and the government's take on it is that the United States will not cast a veto against a UN resolution that the Palestinians present to the UN Security Council. The information was shared at a session of the Jewish Home Political Party leaders by Jewish Home Political Party leader Naftali Bennett. The threat, at least as leaked, implies that the United States is prepared to abandon Israel at the United Nations, a step that could further destabilize relations between the two countries to an unprecedented degree, Kahana said. Kahana spoke of a recent article in the Atlantic magazine by Jeffrey Goldberg, who was commonly seen as reflecting the United States' view toward Israel, referencing the U.S. pressure but from the American point of view. Citing what he called red-hot anger by the Obama administration over Israel's settlement policies and his view that the Netanyahu government openly expresses contempt for Obama's understanding of the Middle East, Goldberg warned that profound changes in the relationship may be coming. "This is a precedent and a very dangerous step," Kahana cautioned about the American threat and said that it was the most chilling thing he had heard uttered in decades of U.S.-Israel relations. Beyond the abandonment of Israel, it also flies in the face of previous agreements with the Americans Americans, including the Egyptian peace deal between Israel and Egypt in 1979, in which the United States promised to hold the line against such maneuvers, Kahana noted. The point is that one can't trust anything the United States says anymore if the information is accurate, according to Kahana. If the United States is able to betray Israel like this, what do other allies and foes think of the U.S., their word, and their policy? Kahana wondered. Former Italian Foreign Minister Federica Mogherini became the new foreign policy chief of the European Union on November the 1st. Upon doing so, she made a trip to the Middle East to visit with Israel and the Palestinians. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with her, saying that Israel opposes unilateral moves by the Palestinians at the UN Security Council, and that recognition by EU member states of a Palestinian state, such as Sweden did recently, was not wise. Netanyahu told Mogherini that it was totally irresponsible for European nations to do such a thing, to recognize, as some European countries have, for a Palestinian state without demanding an equal recognition on their part to the nation state of the Jewish people is irresponsible, Netanyahu said. Furthermore, to give recognition to a Palestinian state that doesn't either recognize the Jewish state or agree to secure arrangements that are necessary for its security and survival is also irresponsible. Therefore, I hope that Europe will respond in a more balanced and more reasonable manner, Netanyahu said. Mogherini, however, was not swayed by Netanyahu's words. Jerusalem is not just a city. It's not just a beautiful city, not just a capital. It is a potential capital of two states. It's also a special place for plenty of people in the world. It's a holy city. So I think that Jerusalem could show to the rest of the world that coexisting is possible. And this is, I think, the challenge for all of us, to show that Jerusalem can be shared. We are asking all in this moment, not in 3 months, not in 6 months, and not in 1 year, all in this moment, to restart a political process, which means peace negotiations, that can strive to achieve a two-state solution, she said. We see that there might be a political will to resume these peace talks and to especially make sure that these peace talks bring the results that we desire. The settlements are an obstacle to the two-state solution. They are illegal. So this is why the European Union is considering that this is its position. The world cannot afford another war in the Gaza Strip, and we need to see the creation of a Palestinian state. We need a Palestinian state. That is the ultimate goal, and this is the position of all the European Union, she said. On Jerusalem, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Mogherini that Jerusalem is Israel's capital, and as such is not a settlement. The neighborhoods in which Jews live and in which we are building have existed for almost 50 years under all Israeli governments. Everyone knows that in any peace settlement they will remain part of Israel. On the issue of settlements, Netanyahu said that he rejected the outlandish claim that the root of the ongoing conflict is this or that settlement. The issue is not land, but rather our very existence, and the refusal to recognize Israel with any borders. On the issue of the Temple Mount, Netanyahu assured Mogherini that Israel is working to restore calm in Jerusalem and is committed to maintaining the status quo on the Temple Mount, in which the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is controlled by Islamic authorities. Muslims have the sole right to pray there, but Jews and Christians can visit. We stand behind the status quo arrangements that have been there for many years. We will not allow them to be changed either by action or by legislation. We've been very clear about that, Netanyahu said. Israel Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman chastised the European Union for its hyper-focus on Israeli building over in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, while it ignores the violence that raged in other countries in the region. Every day, hundreds of people are killed and slaughtered around Israel. We are facing many challenges, more than all of the European Union together, he said. Europe, he said, is disregarding this reality. We are trying to survive in a very difficult reality, and instead of supporting Israel, the European Union blames Israel every day, Lieberman said. A reporter asked Lieberman if Israel planned to change its policies in the West Bank and East Jerusalem in light of European frustration over its settlement activities. community. European officials and diplomats, the reporter said, are coming to give Israel advice. What they hope is that Israel, through this friendly advice, would change its policies. Lieberman reacted to the question with anger, explaining that such European advice was hypocritical. Europe is not offering the same type of advice to Pakistan and India, even though a comprehensive peace is needed there, Lieberman said. In light of the complex situation in the region, with violence in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, he expected Europe to be more sensitive to Israel's security concerns, Lieberman said. Israel is the only country in a tumultuous region where control reigns in spite of constant friction and tension with the Palestinians, Lieberman said. Europe's approach to Israel is exactly like the approach of Europe to Czechoslovakia in 1938, said Lieberman, as he quoted an often used example of European failure to protect that former country from Nazi Germany. Israel, he said, is the only democratic country in the Middle East. Every day you are coming with new pressure upon Israel. It is a mistake. It is hypocritical. In the end of the day, it will be counterproductive, Lieberman said. European support of Palestinian unilateral moves and or imposed solutions to the peace process is particularly harmful, Lieberman said. He charged that Sweden's decision last week to recognize Palestine as a state outside of a negotiated peace agreement with the Palestinians, the first Western European country to do so, was a cynical step to exploit an international situation for its own domestic purposes. This position will not advance peace. It will only distance a peaceful resolution and might even undermine all of our efforts to achieve a strategic breakthrough in our relations with the Palestinians, he said. The Swedish government, he charged, took that step to appease the Muslim community in its country, which is 25 times larger than Israel. It is also part of Sweden's drive to receive the necessary support among UN nations, particularly the 57 Islamic states, to become a member state of the UN Security Council in the future, Lieberman said. The Swedish government, he said, had not told Israel of its decision to recognize a Palestinian state, even though they promised to tell Israel in advance. With this understanding in mind, it was very, very disappointing and surprising to hear of Sweden's recent decision, Lieberman said. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accused Israel of dragging the region into a religious war and vowed that the Palestinians would never agree to Jewish prayer on the Muslim-controlled Temple Mount. Israel's leaders are making a huge mistake if they think they can now establish facts on the ground and divide prayer times at the Al-Aqsa Mosque as they did at the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron, he said. By doing these things, they are leading the region and the world into a devastating religious war. Speaking after weeks of clashes between Israeli security forces and Arab residents of East Jerusalem, as well as a series of terror attacks in Jerusalem, Abbas also repeated the Palestinian pledge to make East Jerusalem the capital of a Palestinian state. The Muslim and Christian world will never accept Israeli claims that Jerusalem is theirs, he said. Jerusalem is our capital, and we will never give this up. Jerusalem that was occupied in 1967 is our Jerusalem. We will safeguard and protect our holy places. As Arab rioting continues in East Jerusalem, Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef urged Jews to stop attempting to enter the Temple Mount, claiming that doing so was a religious offense. We need to stop this. Only then will the people of Israel's blood not be spilt, the rabbi said. He stressed that going to the Temple Mount was a religious offense punishable by death. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.